Hello, today I'm going to take a look at the X870I AORUS Pro Ice, which is a mini ITX motherboard perfect for an all-white small form factor build. So let's go ahead and get it unboxed and we'll take a closer look at it. So in the box with the motherboard we get some paperwork including our installation guide, we get some AORUS stickers and a badge, we get some fan extension cables, there's two white SATA data cables, we get the antenna for our Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4, we get an M.2 thermal pad, an M.2 SSD screw, and we get two screws with slightly different threads on them for securing your motherboard to the case. Taking a closer look at the motherboard and starting at the bottom, working from left to right. First of all, we've got the fan header for our M.2 SSD heatsink. You'll notice the cable runs from it to the heatsink, and the heatsink has an actively cooled fan in it. Just above this, in an elevated position, we've got our HD audio connector, and you'll notice there's a cable running from it. In the middle, we've got a by 16 size PCIe slot, and it's good to see it is reinforced. This is a Gen 5 slot. It will run in by 16 mode, and the PCIe lanes for it come from the CPU. It's good to see we've got an Easy Latch Plus button, and you can simply press on this to open the clip on the PCIe slot. So while this button is definitely going to help with removing your graphics card, it does come at a cost, and that is that you're not going to be able to use a standard screw to secure the bottom right hand side of the motherboard to your case. There's two different screws. They both have the same length with slightly different threads, and you're just going to use the one that fits with the case that you're using. Working up the right hand side of the motherboard, first of all we've got our front panel Type C header, and it supports speeds of up to 10 gigabits per second. And then just behind it we've got a clear CMOS jumper and speaker header. Next to our front panel Type C connector we've got a USB 2.0 header, and then directly behind it we've got our front panel connectors. We've then got two SATA connectors, followed by our USB Type A header, and it will support speeds of up to 5 gigabits per second. Just behind it we've got reset and chassis inclusion jumpers. Then we've got our 24-pin motherboard power connector. Working along the top of the motherboard, just above the RAM slots, we've got our debug LEDs, which you'll find useful if you need to troubleshoot the motherboard. We've then got our system fan and CPU opt headers, and you'll notice that these aren't standard connectors, so you're going to have to use the included cable extensions if you want to use these headers. We've then got two 3-pin 5V ARGB headers, followed by a 4-pin 12V non-addressable RGB header. At the top left of the motherboard, we've got our CPU fan header, and you'll notice it is a standard connector. And next to this we've got a single 8-pin EPS power connector to provide additional power to your CPU. The motherboard has a 10-layer PCB and features an 8+2+1 digital VRM design. In the middle of the motherboard we've got our AM5 socket and standard mounting brackets. We've got two RAM slots, and the motherboard will accommodate up to a maximum of 128 gigabytes of DDR5 at up to 8400 megatransfers per second overclocked. The motherboard has two M.2 SSD slots. There's one on the front of the motherboard behind the actively cooled heatsink, which can be removed toollessly. This is our Gen 5 slot, and it will run in up to by 4 mode with the PCIe lanes coming from the CPU. And our second M.2 SSD slot is on the back of the motherboard. It's a Gen 4 slot, and it will run in up to by 4 mode with the PCIe lanes coming from the chipset. Taking a look at our rear I/O, first of all we've got a HDMI 2.1 port with two USB 2.0 ports next to it. We've then got a Q flash button, which you'll find useful if you need to flash your BIOS. Beneath this we've got two USB Type C ports. The top one is a 10 gigabit per second port, while the bottom one is a USB 4 port supporting speeds of up to 40 gigabits per second and DisplayPort out. Beside these we've got two USB Type A 5 gigabit per second ports, and beside these we've got our audio connectors, which consists of line out and mic, and the motherboard is using the Realtek ALC 4080 codec. Beneath this we've got another two USB Type A ports. They are 10 gigabit per second ports, and next to them we've got a 2.5 gigabit per second Ethernet port. At the bottom we've got our antenna points for our Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4. So the motherboard is currently on sale. In the UK it will set you back just under £310. So as I mentioned at the start, a perfect motherboard for an all-white small form factor build, which is exactly what I've got planned. So just waiting for the case to arrive, and then you're going to be seeing this motherboard in a build on the channel fairly soon. If you have enjoyed this unboxing and overview, please remember to give it a thumbs up, and if you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well.